I know you just got that search warrant. What sticks out to you from what investigators are saying there?
Well, yeah, we've got the search warrant right here, and in it they say that this was suspicious enough that they needed to search the building. And not to get too gruesome, but their bodies had decomposed and nobody had seen them in weeks. The autopsies will hopefully answer some of this, but Diane, they say they don't know why they died.
They say the dead tell no tales, but these 3 dogs saw everything: Bear, Nikita, and Zena. One wouldn't make it out alive. The other 2 would never be the same. Gene Hackman, acclaimed Hollywood icon, was discovered lifeless in his Santa Fe home alongside his wife, Betsy Arakawa. There were no screams, no forced entry, and no signs of a struggle. Just an unsettling hush. Within that silence, 3 canine companions bore witness. When authorities finally searched the property, they found Bear and Nikita standing quietly in the living room, ears pinned back, almost as though they had expected this awful outcome. But Zena, Betsy's devoted shadow, was missing. Not long after, officers opened a bathroom closet and discovered Zena's lifeless form, her eyes open, body curled as though she'd been cornered. Faint scratch marks mar the inside of the door, suggesting a desperate bid for freedom. No blood, no wounds, just a chilling end for a dog known for her protectiveness. In a matter of hours, investigators deemed the case a tragic accident or possible carbon monoxide poisoning. The scene offered so few clues that the detective in charge felt little need to probe deeper. No forced entry, no obvious violence, no splattered blood. The entire investigation quickly dissolved into a footnote. Possible accidental deaths, no foul play. Yet for those who knew the Hackmans, certain details refused to settle. How could 3 lives, 2 people and 1 healthy dog, end so abruptly without a single sign of struggle? And why did the other 2 dogs survive? Weeks before this disaster, Gene had written an email to a friend, never sent, where he mentioned Zena's unsettling behavior. She followed Betsy day and night, sniffing around corners as if sensing a presence no one else perceived. In the same email, Gene hinted at strange noises in the house, creaks along the staircase, doors quietly shifting in the early morning hours. A friend later recalled Betsy complaining that her sleep was often interrupted, and that Zena would station herself outside the bathroom door at odd times, as if standing guard. Bear and Nikita also displayed changes in temperament. Bear, typically calm, began pacing near the front door, staring at it intently. Nikita would remain glued to Betsy's side whenever she went outside, pressing her body close in a posture of silent protection. These episodes seemed random, but in retrospect formed a trail of warnings no one heeded. On the final evening, Gene spoke to someone, perhaps an agent or relative, and conveyed no alarm. The night remained quiet except for a flicker of lights spotted by a neighbor and a bark heard across the street. The following morning, a worried acquaintance, having failed to reach Gene or Betsy, alerted the police. Officers entered a scene so calm it felt surreal. Gene's body in the hallway, Betsy's in the bedroom, both appearing as though they'd simply stopped living. Bear and Nikita crouched in a corner, not barking or snarling, merely watching. Zena's discovery in the closet sent a ripple of unease through the few who bothered to look closer. She had no visible injuries. The door was locked from the inside. Official reports labeled her a brown shepherd dog, dismissing her presence as incidental. No autopsy, no toxicology. After a cursory glance, the detective concluded there was nothing suspicious about her death. To many, it seemed like a gross oversight. Zena was the only one of the 3 dogs who died that night, and no one asked why. The question of motive or cause quickly faded. Though Gene Hackman was a famous figure, the quiet conditions of the scene led to a speedy closure. Rumors of a gas leak or sudden medical emergency swirled, but no one offered a conclusive explanation. Bear and Nikita were taken to a local shelter, awaiting any next of kin or estate arrangements. Typically, dogs that witness violence display fear or aggression, yet these 2 showed an eerie calm. Shelter staff described them as hyper-aware, ears pricking at the slightest sound, eyes scanning every movement of passersby. A maintenance worker wearing a tool belt once strolled by their kennel, and Bear suddenly rose, hackles up, emitting a low, menacing growl. This was no typical bark of alarm. It sounded more like a warning. When the man retreated, Bear resumed his quiet posture. Nikita had her own triggers. She became visibly anxious whenever a man in a hat came near. Shelter employees noted how she would tense, tail low, and stare with haunting intensity. It was as though certain sights or sounds reminded them of something that happened in the Hackman home. Soon, a volunteer animal behaviorist named Dr. Miriam Howell offered her services to observe Bear and Nikita more closely. She'd encountered traumatized pets before, but their reactions were unusual. They didn't shy from all humans, only those wearing specific items or making certain noises. Dr. Howell tested them with recorded door squeaks, capturing audio from the Hackman residence. Bear immediately stiffened. Nikita slunk away, whimpering. Then came a faint chemical odor that Dr. Howell suspected might be linked to cleaning products or sedation agents. Both dogs displayed panic reactions. A single bark from Bear, a trembling retreat from Nikita. Clear signs of memory linked to that smell. While these tests couldn't provide solid legal evidence, they painted a picture of dogs who associated distinct stimuli with the threat. Why else would Bear be calm around most strangers, yet growl at someone carrying tools? What had occurred in Gene Hackman's home that left such a profound imprint? The biggest puzzle remained Zena. Friends described her as fearless, always the first to bark at strangers. Betsy reportedly felt safer whenever Zena was near. If an intruder came, Zena might have been the one to confront them. How then did she end up locked away? If she was subdued or forced into that closet by someone she recognized, it would explain the lack of immediate barking or resistance until the final moment. Another possibility was that Zena sought refuge after sensing imminent danger, but the scratch marks on the closet door suggested she wanted out. Had something been unleashed that only the dogs perceived at first? By the time Bear and Nikita realized the danger, it may have been too late for Zena. Official records never addressed these questions. Gene Hackman's toxicology showed no fatal substances. Betsy's likewise, with no forced entry, no outward violence. Authorities wrapped up the case. But how do we reconcile that with the dog's haunted behavior and Zena's harrowing demise? Some speculated a friend or staff member might have entered the house under the pretense of familiarity. The dogs, trusting this person, raised no alarm until Zena realized something was off. Maybe she barked in defense of Betsy, was locked away, and the intruder executed a plan leaving no trace. If a toxin or subtle method were used, it might elude simple testing. This scenario, while grim, matched the dog's lasting fears of certain items, yet it remained unproven without deeper investigation. After the funeral services for Gene and Betsy, the media moved on, focusing on Gene's storied Hollywood career. Betsy's name trailed behind as a side note, and Zena's plight barely registered. Bear and Nikita were transferred to a family friend. In those early nights, they woke the caretaker with frantic barking, running to the front door around 2 a.m., tails lowered, ears back, as though they expected someone to appear. No one ever did. Over time, the dogs settled somewhat, but triggers still set them off. Clanking tools, the scrape of a door hinge. This pattern lent weight to the theory that the dogs encountered someone carrying specific equipment that night. Maybe that person left behind faint chemical traces. Dr. Howell believed a thorough search of the Hackman home could yield evidence. If investigators bothered to reopen the case, could there be microscopic residues of something used to incapacitate or kill? Could a second look at Zena's remains, if preserved, reveal a clue? The authorities weren't interested. They'd already closed the file. In Santa Fe, gossip thrived on the mystery. People whispered about an old dispute or hidden secrets in Gene's life. Others shrugged, content to trust the official story. Meanwhile, Bear and Nikita bore the scars of memory, flinching at seemingly random cues. In the swirl of unanswered questions, the dog stood as living proof that something else had happened, something more complex than a sudden group tragedy. Time drifted on. New headlines arose, overshadowing the quiet puzzle left behind. Gene Hackman's legacy largely remained intact. Retrospectives praised his acting genius, while fans paid tribute to his best performances. Betsy's fate was treated as collateral, with mainstream sources focusing more on Gene's final bow than the grim details. Zena was almost never mentioned. Occasionally, someone would recall the oddities: locked doors, no break-in, and a closet-scratched dog. They'd wonder how a healthy animal could just die, or why no one tested Zena for toxins. Some pressed for deeper inquiry, but interest waned. The caretaker caring for Bear and Nikita reported they'd sometimes wake from nightmares, trembling, scanning the dark. He surmised they were reliving that night. A year passed, then two. Rumors of a hush-hush settlement or hidden insurance claims flickered, unsubstantiated. If there was a secret motive, it lay buried with Gene, Betsy, and Zena. Bear and Nikita couldn't tell their story. They communicated only with body language and the triggers that made them quake. Dr. Howell continued her research, collecting data on how these dogs reacted to specific items. She remained convinced that they remembered an intruder's scent or the jingle of a tool belt. Zena's final moments still haunted anyone who cared to revisit the case. Those claw marks testified to her desperation. Was she fighting to reach Betsy, or simply struggling to escape? The official statement insisted nothing sinister occurred, but the hush around the incident felt disquieting. The simplest explanation seemed too shallow to explain such peculiar details. Some in Santa Fe called it an unfortunate accident, perhaps a heating system fault or a rare medical catastrophe. Yet those who met the dogs couldn't ignore their haunted eyes. Dr. Howell observed how Bear sometimes circled a room, sniffing at corners as though searching for an invisible threat. Nikita, calmer by nature, froze whenever she heard a metallic rattle, her body tense as if bracing for something terrible. Behind every wag of a tail or flick of an ear, the dog seemed to hold onto a story no one else could decode. The caretaker who adopted them noticed they slept fitfully, whimpering in the dead of night. Sometimes he found them standing guard by a window, gazing at the empty yard, as if waiting for someone or something to return. Occasionally, Dr. Howell would stop by, running gentle experiments with harmless triggers. She'd jingle keys or tap on a wooden plank, watching the dogs react. Now and then, Bear would leap into a defensive stance, as if confronting a ghost. In those moments, Dr. Howell wondered if he remembered Zena by his side, barking at the first sign of danger. Zena had been the sentinel of the trio, the one who sensed trouble first. Bear and Nikita never matched her vigilance in time, and they now bore the weight of her absence. The echoes of that terrible night lingered, a testament to what these animals experienced, and what investigators had chosen to dismiss. They say the dead tell no tales, but the living sometimes do, especially when their memories are etched in fear. Bear and Nikita's behavior still alludes to a visitor who arrived without force. Whatever happened that night, the official story remains incomplete. If the house itself held more clues, chemical residues, faint prints, an overlooked camera angle, no one sought them. Gene Hackman's fans remember his iconic roles. Betsy is a footnote in most accounts, and Zena's name scarcely appears at all. Meanwhile, two survivors bear silent witness. Even years later, a certain jingle of tools or the creak of a hinge can send Bear and Nikita into trembling vigilance. They're testifying in the only way they can, pointing us toward a presence that slipped in and out with chilling ease. So how did 3 lives end behind locked doors, with no sign of violence and one devoted dog left to die in a closet? The truth may rest in overlooked details, or in the dog's haunted eyes, whenever an echo of that night returns. Until someone revisits the case with the determination to unlock its secrets, the final piece of the puzzle remains hidden. But dogs don't forget. Bear and Nikita remember, in their stillness, in their sudden growls, in the uncanny way they react to certain sights and sounds. They keep the memory alive. If we ever choose to listen, their unspoken testimony might point us to the answers left buried by a rushed investigation and a world too eager to move on.